There's wanting to live God's way, and then there's the challenges of real life. How do we fight to make His will our priority? Our guests today are going to share their story of how they found courage and hope in God's faithfulness while facing circumstances that could have pulled their marriage apart. This is Embracing the Challenge, finding love and building relationships. And I'm Gabriel Chan, here with my wife Rebecca, and guests Mensah and Natalie. Thank you so much for joining us here today. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Well, my name is Mensah. I'm originally from the US. I'm an investment banker.
I'm Natalie. I work in legal technology, and we have a daughter, Beatrice.
So tell us a little bit about how you met.
We first met at a friend's birthday celebration, and that's the first time I ever laid eyes on Mensah. He's from the from the US, and but then we didn't start dating until 1 to 2 years later.
Okay.
So
you had time to build a friendship.
yes.
Yeah, we had time to build a friendship. I mean, when we first started kind of hanging out, talking to each other, it was literally just to be friends. I don't think either one of us were thinking in the back of our minds, okay, this is my wife, this is my husband, but we just cultivated a friendship over time and spending time together, talking to each other over the phone. But as you,
And there was a special day, wasn't there, where one day, you know, she was helping you move and took you to IKEA.
yes. So I was moving flat and I needed some help to move things and also to get a few things from IKEA. So Natalie had a car, so I called her and I said, would you mind helping me go to IKEA and pick up a few things?
Now, did you have any weird intentions that day?
I don't think I did. I really just wanted to buy a few things from IKEA, but I will admit that at that point I was definitely starting to have feelings for Natalie. And it's, you know, when you're friends with someone and you're spending time together, it's natural that that person becomes part of your life. And when you don't speak to them, you're thinking, well, what are they doing? What are they up to? So it was a great opportunity for us to really spend some more quality time together.
And that was the first significant quality time. I wouldn't call it a first date, but it was the first quality time we spent together. And at the beginning of the date, he was definitely in the friend zone, and I didn't intend to start dating, but in sharing quality time with him, his inner qualities came out, and yeah, he just had fundamental qualities that I was looking for in a partner. He was very loyal and dependable and loving. So
over those IKEA meatballs and time together looking for furniture, something began to happen.
yeah, absolutely,
It
absolutely.
did. I think perhaps by the end of the day we might have been holding hands and really blossomed from there. I think for me, what really attracted me to Natalie was her heart and the fact that she was willing to give up her time and of herself to help me. So I remember, you know, telling my family and my friends that I've met this amazing girl and like she's got the most beautiful heart and the way about her. She's so giving and she's so caring.
What was your first date? How did you go from IKEA to dating?
We both worked in the city, and we started to meet after work and have drinks after work and go for dinner.
Yeah.
And just spend quality time quite regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our relationship organically grew from there. But over the course of conversations and getting to know each other, Mensah asks about one of my friendships with my female friend who would offer to take me to a Buddhist meeting, and Mensah started talking about Christ because I was intending to go to a meeting with her.
What meeting?
Buddhist.
Oh, Buddhist meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
Buddhist.
Yeah, so I said, well, why don't you, I was thinking, okay, it's interesting, why don't you come to church with me? And I started talking about my faith, and she eventually started coming to the church that we attend now with me.
Oh, cool. Wow.
I think I had a huge void in my life because my mother had passed away, and I was just searching, and a friend invited me to that meeting.
And so in that journey, getting to know each other, your experiences, you've actually discovered that you wanted to know each other more and found God together in a very real way.
Yeah.
And what did that look like as your relationship started to come together? You're starting to date, you're thinking about God and His role in your life. What sort of challenges did you face, and and how did you overcome them?
That's a good question. I think early in the relationship, as Natalie was coming to church with me, she became a Christian as well. We struggled, for example, in areas of purity and sexual purity, and that was a big challenge for us, to be honest. I think the big turning point, though, was a sermon that we heard at church from yours truly,
Wow.
which really challenged our hearts. And I think at that point, the Holy Spirit really challenged us around the pure, how God sees marriage, and to God, marriage is very sacred. And I think we were really challenged to honor God in our relationship by honoring what marriage is and what marriage isn't.
Yeah, and I thank you for your courage in sharing that, because I think many couples do. We love each other, and so we want to express that in some ways, and that might be in a physical way. And I think what I love about the story, because I remember the conversation you had with me after that, was that you wanted to restore the standard. And sometimes we can say, you know what, because we love each other, we don't want to rock the boat and have this difficult conversation, but saying to God, you know what, you're first in our relationship. It's almost because we love one another, we want to wait until marriage. And while we might have slipped in the past and fallen into sin, we want to say, God, you know what, we reconsecrate our marriage and we now want to move forward with you. And I think that's such a powerful lesson to learn early in relationship.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's we wanted to have the right foundation. And as you said, we really loved God, we loved one another. And I think in our thinking, we had to learn to trust God. Because if you trust him and you love him, then you trust that he knows what's best for you. You trust that he knows who the right partner is for you. And by trusting God, I think that was the first step in our relationship, which definitely helped us when we got married.
I do remember feeling fearful. If our relationship was built on physical connection, then what would happen in the periods where we're not being physical? So I wanted our relationship to be built on something far more solid than physical contact.
What would you say your love languages are?
My personal love language is quality time. I think I really long for us to have quality time as a couple as well as a family. So quite often I make sure that we have set time in our calendars for quality time and going away for weekends and just connecting with each other.
Yeah, my quality time is, my love language, as it were, is affirmation. So it's really important for me to be affirmed verbally from Natalie and get compliments. And even though I'm a guy, I still like compliments.
What happens if you don't speak each other's love language, or
I'm
when you
still
do?
trying to fine tune that and enhance that skill in that area. For example, if Mensah's had a haircut and he walks through the door and I don't instantly tell him he looks handsome, then he can feel as if I haven't affirmed him. So I do try to make a mental note, but sometimes it's challenging if you're distracted or he walks through the door and I'm in the middle of doing something. I've seen that he looks gorgeous and I have noticed that he's had a haircut, but I don't vocalise it as quickly as he would desire. So yeah.
And I think that those communication skills, just identifying them as areas of growth before we get married is so helpful, because when we get to being married, we need to work on those love languages regularly, because otherwise, you can fall into traps of bad communication and so on. If you were to think about now you're in marriage, how do you make sure that things are working? What would be warning signs to you about how your relationship is going?
So for us, we think what we've learned is that a lot of times when there's arguments or you're not connecting, it comes down to not communicating. And so we're always trying to find our way back to one another, so to speak, in the sense that if there's a problem, sometimes it's simple as just sitting across from one another and letting the other person talk and understanding what they're feeling. So for us, effective communication and keeping the lines of communication open is extremely important, and it helps us to really keep a healthy marriage.
So, but you're both working full time and have a little daughter and lead busy lives. How do you practically make that work for the two of you?
It is challenging, and I think there are definitely areas for improvement, but I think that we're very blessed that we have a nanny that can help support us if we need to to have quality time away. And we have different styles of communication as well, and a supportive family. My father does really support us with looking after my daughter. But when we do communicate, we do have different styles of communication. For example, I like to give Mensah an immersive experience about my day, exactly what happened, what made me happy, what made me frown. And he literally sometimes just gives me a one-word answer. So I have to be patient with him and ask him open-ended questions and really try to let him express how his day has been. Because I can't really support him if I'm not equipped with how his day has gone and areas for improvement, or to be able to affirm him if something he's done well, and just really encourage each other in our professional careers.
Yeah, I mean, when you're working a hectic schedule, you know, sometimes we'll come home and it's literally eating dinner, quick conversation, and all we both want to do is go to bed because we're really tired. So, for example, sometimes we'll try and speak to each other during the day. So Natalie, when I started a job recently, and when I started, Natalie would give me a call just to see how things are going, and so I really appreciated that, getting a call from her, and I'll call her as well during the day. So sometimes we can have a quick conversation around lunchtime, even if we don't have a lot of time in the evening, and it helps.
I think something that you're saying there is so powerful about communicating each other's love languages and communicating regularly, because what we're constantly doing by doing so is building up our love tanks. We're keeping a fresh view, a correct view towards one another, seeing each other through the eyes of love because we're feeling full. And that's such a key skill to learn, because there are times that we might face where we need to draw on those love reserves as situations that we might find ourselves in, whether it's learning how to be a dad and all of the stresses and tensions that come with that. I mean, Mensah, having two ladies at home, what happens there?
Yeah, I think since I've become a father, I think I've become almost three people. So I'm me, I'm Mensah, but I'm a husband and a father. And I don't always get it right, but it's a challenge. You're trying to balance, you know, the relationship with my wife as well as with Beatrice, my daughter. I mean, there'll be times if we're all in the same room and the two of them are talking to me at the same time, and I'm literally having two conversations, and I can't stop one conversation because I want to give them both attention. But I think what I try and do is make sure that Natalie and I have a strong foundation and a strong relationship, because if our marriage is strong, and then that means that we can be good parents to Beatrice. And so everything flows from having a good marriage. I think sometimes people think that when you have kids, you have to throw everything into your children. But as fathers, we have to make sure that our wives are happy and that we're giving them quality time and that our marriage is being looked after, because only then can we be good fathers and parents to our children.
That's really good.
And everything that you've spoken about in terms of love languages and making sure that your relationship is strong and stable really prepares you for some of the challenges that life can throw at you. And you've had a number of challenging experiences that you faced as a couple.
Yeah, exactly. So our daughter Beatrice, she's 3 now, but shortly after she was born, she had to go into the neonatal unit. She was having seizures as a result of a stroke she had, and it was a very trying time. She was in the neonatal unit for about 2 weeks after she was born before she came home.
Must have been terrifying.
It was. It was really terrifying. Especially, you know, we went through the process. We were praying to be parents, and to have a newborn baby is such a blessing. And then to have that happen was very, very challenging. It was almost like you were in a different world or someone else's life. But I think there were a lot of things that helped us to get through it. I think first of all was, well, definitely our family. And you know, my mother was over from the U.S. Natalie's father was there as well, and our parents just really lifted us up and supported us. And so the family support was important, but also just, you know, the prayer support. And when you're in that situation, you're almost powerless. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know what to do. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a dad. I'm just a husband. And so I just had to give it to God. And I just said, Lord, you're in control here. There's nothing in my power that I can do. I just literally have to give everything to you. And just please save my daughter. But whatever you do, I'm going to trust you, because you're my God and you're in control of our life.
And I think that that it's such a joy to see how God has worked through that, because Beatrice now, she's running around imitating mummy, wanting to have dresses the same as her mum, and really, really growing into a beautiful young girl. But that's not the only challenges you faced. Natalie, I know that you've faced over time some real serious challenges in terms of miscarriages.
Yeah. Prior to Beatrice, I had a number of miscarriages. And the first time I ever fell pregnant, we were rejoicing. We were so happy to have conceived. But we sadly had a miscarriage. And when we went to have a scan, we were informed that although we had miscarried, we were still pregnant, because that pregnancy was actually twins. And so we were rejoicing, thanking God, praying for the child's growth and development. But sadly, a few weeks later, that child also passed. Oh. And so during that time, it was very challenging. We were both grieving, but we just thank all the prayers from our community within church that really supported and lifted and really encouraged us during that difficult time.
And what was going through your mind at the time? Like, what was the kind of thoughts that you were having, or how were you kind of processing it?
I think you feel a sense of failure because you're trying to achieve something. That's your goal, to be a mother, to be parents. And it just feels as if that rug has been pulled from underneath you. But during that time, it was just time for us to really press into our faith. And I'm quite binary in my thinking. I'm either pregnant or I'm not, or I'm either a believer in God and believe that He's good, or I don't. So that's the way that I process, and that's the way that I get through grief. But we both have different ways of dealing with that. So that was my experience. Yeah. But I think Mensah was a bit more introvert and didn't really want to communicate and withdrew.
Yeah, it was challenging for me. When I think back on that time, I definitely withdrew and was very silent, and definitely could have handled things a lot better from my perspective. But I think during that process, I learned how to be more loving and how to be more supportive to Natalie. And I was able to see what she was going through. And I think by being a better husband and being more supportive of her, it helped me to work through what I was dealing with and helped me to meet her needs. So I learned a lot from that situation. I learned how to be more supportive husband. I learned how to listen more. And actually through listening and trying to understand what she was going through, it enabled me it gave me the courage to talk about what I was thinking. And so I didn't have to be introverted, but I could just release that to her and get some peace and some freedom.
Yeah, it's really powerful, because I can imagine when you're so hurt yourself, I can imagine, that you would almost want to kind of protect yourself and keep things to yourself, but how you then reach out to your spouse and recognise that they're also really hurting, and how you support each other in that. Yeah, it must be very difficult, but I guess brings you together also.
I think until you communicate, I wasn't able to see it from his perspective. And although it's physically happening to me, he's still losing a child. So.
And I had to see probably the opposite. It was physically happening to her, and there was so much that she was going through. I think that's so powerful in marriage. And it's not that we were so mature, that we were so wise. I mean, there's a lot of grace involved. I think there's a lot of grace from God and just giving us the wisdom and the space and the patience to work through this, because sometimes it can drive marriages apart. But I think what we did was instead of focusing on our own individual hurt, we tried to see it from the other person's perspective. And in doing that, you become sensitive to what they're going through, and it brings you together.
And this wasn't the first time that it happened, was it? I mean, it's happened a few times since.
It has.
And it's due to a medical scenario?
It's not medical. I think it's quite common.
Okay.
It happens more frequently, but I think we just don't express or talk about it as often. It's somewhat taboo.
Yeah.
And so how did you then handle the third and fourth time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, as Natalie said, it happens a lot more often than people think. And I think as Christians, sometimes we're taught, be victorious and you're victorious. But when these things are happening, you feel anything but victorious. I know through our cell groups at the church we go to, we were given a lot of support. And actually, when you're talking to cell members and you're hearing their experiences, you realize, well, actually, other people have gone through this as well. And so we got a lot of support through church and through fellow believers who really encouraged us. They prayed for us, and I think that also helped because we realized we weren't alone.
I think the benefits of being vulnerable and expressing and speaking and communicating to others, then you're able to share each other's stories and testimonies of how God has really triumphed through. Yeah.
What kind of prayers were you praying at that time? How were you kind of talking to God? And
we were a part of the womb ministry as well.
So we were getting support. There was a specific ministry at the church we go to who was giving us support around becoming parents and working through that. So it was very formal from that perspective. I think personally, it was a mix of emotions. Sometimes anger. So when you're praying, sometimes it's prayers of anger. But other times, just prayers of maybe thankfulness and just completely relying on God to come through and to be in control. And it's very difficult to just put everything to God and give up control when you feel like you have control when you don't. It can be scary, but.
I think through that experience, you do grow and mature in your spiritual maturity, and you begin to really trust that God will get you through that period of difficulty.
Definitely.
how would you say that you you healed through that process, or healed together? What would you say were kind of the key things that helped that healing process?
It's a good question. I think, what it was I think realizing that we're a couple and we're married and God's put us together. And so we're not going through this individually. And I think we always believe that if God brought us together, He's got a purpose for us. He's got a plan for us. And it's a joint plan. And I think we just clung to the idea that God has a plan for our marriage and for our life. And He brought us together. He's guided us up until now to this point. And He's not going to walk away from us. We put our faith in God instead of putting our faith in, the world or, self-help books. But we know God works. And I think it was that willingness just to rely on Him and to see all the things that He had brought us through up until that point and continue to trust in Him.
I think that's so powerful. And if I can just take a moment to talk to you, but I think that some people would ask this question: what happens with that child? They are part of our life. They're someone that we love so much, and all the hope that we have. And to say to you, but also to say, if someone were listening, that God is gracious and faithful. And I believe that you will see your children in heaven. I believe you'll meet them. And I think that that's such a great promise that God gives us, that He is a loving Father, that there is nothing that happens without Him being fully and integrally involved, and that He receives His children to Himself. And in a very real way, I think, and hope that for you that brings comfort, but also for people who are at home, they're thinking about their own situation and perhaps grieving, knowing that God is with them, God is for them in that moment. And just thinking about your revelation of God, you've talked it a little bit, but you've said finding that God is faithful. How does His faithfulness affect the way that you see marriage?
I think His faithfulness, it helps you understand and realize that He's fully sufficient, and that for every situation that you go through in a marriage, there's grace and there's mercy for that situation. It could be an argument, could be losing a child, or something else that happens in life. And I think God has, marriage is sacred to Him, and so He gives blessings to people who are married, and He upholds marriage. It's part of His plan. And if you remember that, what you're doing is a part of God's plan, then it gives you some confidence that whatever comes your way, there's always God's power to get you through because you're living God's will.
Natalie, what would you say to someone if they're out at home today and they're struggling with the same situation? You've been there, you've experienced it personally. How would you encourage them in this moment?
I think with me personally, when I was grieving, I think it was very important for me to have a supportive network, and I was a part of a cell group. So having supported sisters that really fed in, edified, raised me up, will call me, actually really shower me with love during that time. That meant the world to me, and because you do feel as if you haven't really succeeded in an area and you feel downtrodden, and but yeah, just having that community of friendship there outside of a marriage as well is equally as important.
Mensah, Natalie, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing so vulnerably about your story. It was so powerful, and I'm sure that it's going to change many lives. Really appreciate you both here today.
Thank you.
And we hope that Mensah and Natalie's sharing today helps you to process your own pain. Sometimes challenges can come our way that we can't make sense of, and they threaten to send us into a negative spiral. As we've seen, marriage can provide a vital context for love, support, and healing, and a place to awaken our hope in God. Rather than pulling you apart, it can bring you closer together in Him. Our prayer and encouragement to you is, if you're facing overwhelming challenges and loss, there is hope. God is with you and will never leave you. I want to encourage you to start talking again. Talk to loved ones, share with them. Pray real prayers to God, prayers of anger and of hope. And if you need to, take a step, contact local support services through your church and through the NHS. And if you want to respond to today's topic, we do encourage you to contact us here on our website, embracingthechallenge.life. Join us again next time for Embracing the Challenge.